We thought this would be a good day to have a little meeting before with our priests and to begin talking about our special diocesan and parish planning. So in your packet there's a short little prayer service. Let us pray. Gracious God, you have called us together today to assist in planning for the future of how parishes will be organized for our diocese. Empower us to make recommendations to the bishop, which will enhance the vitality of parish life as we work to discern your will. Strengthen us all as we work with parishes and priests, the religious and laity, our deacons. Listen to them as they review who they are as parishes and generate ideas related to what they can become. Father, shower us with your blessings as we begin this prophetic journey, just as you cared for your people who journeyed with Moses through the desert. We ask this in the name of Jesus, our Savior and brother, who lives and reigns with the Father and Holy Spirit forever and ever. Amen. Deacon Bob Sante.
As we begin our session here this afternoon, we are reminded as we draw closer to this weekend, the readings from the Feast of Corpus Christi. We have a reading here we want to share with you for a short moment of reflection that comes from the book of Deuteronomy. Do not forget the Lord, your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, a place of slavery, who guided you through the vast and terrible desert with its serpents and scorpions, its parched and waterless ground, who brought forth water for you from the flinty rock, and fed you in the desert with manna, a food unknown to your fathers. The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
Today in the church calendar is the Feast of Corpus Christi, and a very fitting day to gather together to celebrate our priesthood and also to reflect for a little bit on our future planning for our diocese. But just looking at this short reading from Deuteronomy for the Feast of Corpus Christi, just pause for a moment and then just share with the person next to you just perhaps one thought that touches you wherever you're at right now, that the Lord is speaking to you and to all of us, to one another. We're welcoming here today a couple of members of the Reach Group, John Reed and Maureen Gallagher. I'll introduce them in just a minute. They were here back in, I think it was about March, wasn't it? And met with the Presbyteral Council, and we had the vicars come in that day too to share kind of an overview of the program and the plan. I know there were 7 of us went to Chicago about 2 years ago, and we met with for 2 days with the Reed Group, just kind of looking at this whole process of parish planning. Many times we've suspended parishes or suspended worship in parishes, and we've done so many things piecemeal. And then I think it was when we were having our assembly days, and I was sitting about right up here in front and talking with Archbishop Flynn. They had just finished the process in Minneapolis, St. Paul, which he humbly admitted, I wish I had done that the whole time I was Archbishop, but it was left up to my predecessor to do. And so that's when I think I began talking in earnest with Bishop Jenke. And we just kind of said, now seems to be the right time. And there have been many good things and nice things that have been happening as we go along. Fittingly, I think just the fact that here on the Feast of Corpus Christi, the body of Christ, that we're gathering to talk and share about this. So at this time, I'd like to call up our Bishop, Bishop Daniel Jenke, to share a few of his thoughts for beginning.
Now I know how carefully and scrupulously on EWTN you watch the meetings of the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops. I know your TVs are on constantly, and if you look carefully, you saw me in the last seat of the last row there. But I didn't want to share this, but I've shared it with some, so I had this kind of mystical experience recently. Padre Pio appeared to me in a dream and taught me how to bilocate. And I also was able that week to be present at Notre Dame for a province assembly. Now you're wondering what this has to do with planning for our diocese. Well, I'll tell you. A whole bunch of my confreres are from the Scranton, Wilkes-Barre, Scranton Diocese. They have parishes there. They have a King's College. And I heard about the work the Reed Group did in that diocese. And I think my impression would be they had much more challenges than we have. Everywhere you can kind of look across the valley and see onion domes and church towers everywhere you look, and the mines are closed, and a lot of people have moved away. And they had all this church buildings, and how do they serve Christ in that area? And my community is exactly like you guys. We complain about everything, and sometimes are not immediately fired up about something, but they said, everybody I talked to said, it really worked. The priests are happy with it. The people are energized. And I'm not, honestly, I didn't know what they would have said, but it kind of affirmed me in what we are about to undertake. Monsignor is saying the truth. As you know, I thought we would do this incrementally. And it began with Monsignor doing some studying around the country. And then it went on, we brought it up at the Presbyteral Council, and it was really at the urging of you, our priests, that we would look at this across the whole diocese. And I was a little slow to get on board, but I'm glad I finally did. And I have a lot of confidence about what we're going to do. And I guess the first thing I'd say is a negative. This is not about bulldozing churches or closing down parishes. It really is how we can be the Catholic Church in Central Illinois in these coming decades. It's about growth. It's, we know we have all sorts of things in our patch of the kingdom, in our region of Illinois, in the Banana Republic that we call this state. But we as a church, like all those folks who went before us and all the priests that founded all our parishes, it's about winning the world for Christ. So this process is about how the Catholic Church grows and flourishes. It's certainly about having stronger parishes, not weaker ones. How we do better at what is the basic unit of church life, parish living. It's about how they grow and we get better at doing what we do. It's about faith, how we have vibrant communities, how people do not regard their parish kind of like they regard the beauty parlor and the bowling alley and their favorite restaurant where they have their seat where they always go to no matter what. No, it's about walking with Christ. It's about experiencing all the challenges of the Holy Spirit. It's about a church alive with faith, doing the things the apostles and martyrs did. I do love church history, and every time I read about the history of our church, this diocese, in the 19th century, they faced extraordinary challenges, but they were on fire with faith. and they grew in that faith. It's about doing all this together. I am convinced that in regions, in vicariates, in neighborhoods, if our parishes and our clergy worked more closely together, we could do more. That doesn't mean abolishing parishes. It means if somebody's got a great youth program going on, it ought to be open to everybody. It means getting together before Christmas to talk about the Holy Week schedule and the Easter schedule. It's, as I know goes on widely in our diocese, is how we make the sacrament of reconciliation available, how we promote spiritual direction, about spiritual reading, about continuing education, about that whole generation of Catholics for whom perhaps the deposit of faith hadn't been passed on. And not doing that just my parish against the whole world, but all of us united together to do it. And then finally, it is about gift. We are approaching Corpus Christi. The Eucharist is the thanksgiving prayer to the Father in the Spirit. I'm not saying anything you don't know, but it's something I have to remember day after day and year after year. We are gifted to be Roman Catholic believers. We are gifted incomparably, what we remember today at Jubilee, to serve Christ as his priests. We are gifted to be the servants of a servant church. It is everything the Lord says in the Beatitudes is simply true. We are blessed every time we do what the Lord asks us. So our happiness comes from serving as his priests. Now, the more clever among us here might have noticed growth, faith. How does this turn out to be gift? Anyway.
Growth in faith.
Growth in faith. I'm terrible with acronyms. I really am. But it's growth in faith together. Does that spell gift? Thank you, Paul. But that's part of what we're going to talk about over these next couple of years. With our laity, with our deacons, with the religious communities we're so blessed in this diocese to have among us, with all sorts of people, that it is simply a gift to be a Catholic believer, to be a disciple of Christ, to be a part of the Holy Roman Catholic Church. And that in that context, there's nothing we can't face and nothing we can't do. And if there might be, I'm not saying out of our 26 counties, there might not be some churches that'll become chapels of convenience. There might be. We aren't starting out that way. Some places we can't use anymore or can't afford to use. But fundamentally, it's how we continue to grow and reorganize ourselves to do what we already do, you men do so very well, but to do it even better. Our goals, which you'll see in this packet, is one, to enhance the vibrancy of parish life in the Diocese of Peoria. If the family is the fundamental unit of the membership in the church, the parish is the fundamental unit of Catholic life in this diocese and every other diocese. Two, to strengthen the presence and ministry of the church in our cities, our towns, and our rural areas. Because the rural population, and I know Monsignor Mack would probably hit me on the head if I didn't say this, because the rural population has declined, that doesn't mean we are absolutely committed to serve rural families and rural life. We know it's not, 10 kids in the little tiny family farm anymore. So we have to serve them perhaps in some new ways. And in places like Peoria, the Quad Cities, and Champaign, and Danville, all those areas are different. And we have to always be ready to find new ways to foster. And you know how vital this next one is. Appreciation for participation in the Sunday Eucharist and the sacrament of reconciliation. How many times when we're together having a beverage do you say, oh, it was nice you came for confirmation. That's probably the last time we'll see those kids until they get married. Or the one that breaks my heart even more is the kids all come in their beautiful clothes for First Communion, and the very following Sunday, their parents have not brought them back. How we reinvigorate that no one can live the Catholic life without Sunday Eucharist. How we indeed, I'll give the example of Streeter, how people tell me, I know it's been contentious, how there is a real difference in a packed church and where you get 80 or 90 people at daily Mass where you have people of devotions and reconciliation, instead of a few people huddled at the corners of half-empty churches, what that does for a parish community. But how many other ways, and 1,000 ways that you'll come up with, the diaconate will come up with, the faithful and the religious will come up with, how many other days we make, we all know the phrase, the Eucharist, the source and the summit of everything we do as Catholics. And then stewardship, time, talent, and treasure. Again, I have some little experience of this, where people start committing their time and talent. I know this sounds like a fairy tale, but treasure is no longer a problem. I've seen it with these own eyes. In those vast years, literally only 5, I was a pastor of a parish. I saw it happen, where suddenly the offertory goes up because people committed themselves to help with the flowers, to sing in the choir, to coach soccer. If people get their butt off the last part of the pew and give their time and talent, our financial challenges disappear. It sounds like magic, but it isn't. So I know those are going to be elements of what we're going to do. I urge all of us, me to begin with, to not be afraid. Remember JP2, be not afraid. You know what that meant in all our lives. It sure did to me. Because I was lots of times as a priest very afraid. But when the Holy Father, I still remember when he came out and held up that cross in St. Peter's Square, it knocked me over. Popes are not infallible about appointing bishops, but he was the one who appointed me. But most of all, he was blessed. He is the blessed, but he was such a spiritual light in our faith community that we needed then. And his best words were not to be afraid. And all of this finally is tied into Corpus Christi. Unless the Lord shall build the house, they labor in vain. We all our labors will be in vain unless we are united in prayer, that we are interceding, asking Our Lady to pray with us and for us, that when we're at the altar, we ask our high priest to help us be his priests in this world, how to energize our people, how to work closely with our deacons. None of this takes away the role of priest as pastor, as the head and shepherd of his parish, but it does allow priests to extend that leadership and be strengthened by the talents of the people he serves. So this time of year, when we all kind of like to do a little less than right up till now, thanks for being here. We'll have more presentation. We will pray, as we always do, pray with joy and intensity in the cathedral, then we'll eat and party hardy. God bless you.
At this time, I'd like to introduce 2 members of the Reed Group who are with us today and will be working with us over the next year. First of all, John Reed, and then Maureen Gallagher.
Good afternoon to all of you. Thank you for coming. Some of you I've met before when we met with the Presbyterial Council and the Vicars, but to those who I haven't met, I live down the road in Seattle, Washington. I was originally from Chicago, the north side of Chicago, so I do have some Midwest roots and lived for a while in New York. I worked 18 years for the Archdiocese of Seattle, from about 1979 to 1997. And some of what we're going to present to you came out of my experience working in planning within the Archdiocese of Seattle. And my colleague Maureen worked for many years in the Archdiocese of Milwaukee, also around some of this. So some of what we want to talk to you is out of that experience. Our company itself is 14 years old. Most of our work is serving the Catholic Church and serving dioceses, religious communities, colleges and universities, parishes and schools. And our mission, just to kind of highlight that for a second, is to help leaders and organizations transform challenges into opportunities to create a better world. So part of what we're going to talk with you about in terms of growing in faith together is the challenges, the realities that you face in parish life, and how can those be transformed in a way that helps the whole church in this wonderful diocese be transformed into an even more vital and life-giving place. So what Maureen and I want to do is kind of to walk through the packet that you have. And so you might have that handy as a roadmap. We're actually going to do it in a different way that's on here. So we'll kind of explain that approach as we move along. But we want you to understand kind of the why of this project. The bishop has already identified 4 of the goals. There's actually 10 of them. We want to also talk to you very directly, very honestly about some of the good news experience we've had working on the diocese and some of the challenges that have undermined a process like this being successful. So I look at the title of this project, Growing in Faith Together, or the acronym GIFT, and say to you right up front, this can be a wonderful gift, but it's not guaranteed. It requires all of your cooperation. It requires the good efforts of those we talked to earlier today, the diocesan staff. It requires the principals and the DREs and the good people throughout the diocese. We expect to speak to the deacons and the principals and a lot of the religious educators in early August, so they hear directly about their role. So our purpose in this presentation is not just to go through some facts and figures or how this process is going to go on and why, but to speak directly to you in terms of what are you going to be asked to do to help contribute to this truly being a gift for the whole diocese. We also want to invite you to ask questions that you have from your own situations, whether you're in an urban setting or in a rural setting, how this impacts you. So let's have a conversation with each other that helps you understand what growing in faith together is about, what you're going to be expected to do by way of work, and kind of the support you're going to receive to do that work very well. So let's maybe return, Maureen, to the goals for a moment and just kind of move through the process. So if you would turn for a moment just to page 4 in your packet.
And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the first 4 that the bishop so eloquently talked about. They really are at the heart of the project, but there are 10 goals altogether. Notice the goal on number 5, and I think that should be on page 5, to promote vocations to the ordained and lay ministries. So as we go about doing all this, what we're really doing is promoting vocations and developing leadership. And the amazing thing is once people get into implementation, they have to come up with very specific ways that they're promoting goals. So this is not a plan that's going to end up on people's shelves. There really is a call to accountability. We've been amazed at the creative ways people have been promoting vocations to the priesthood and to lay ministry. Number 6, to ensure that all parishioners have lifelong faith formation. And normally the area where people really need to focus anew is on youth ministry, young adult ministry, as well as adult ministry. We've done a fairly good job with child ministry, but how do we continue this process? And actually, the way the whole process is designed, there's a lot of adult education built right into it, because when you look at the criteria are built on sound theology of what a parish is. So we're really doing ecclesiology as we do this, to strengthen service to the marginalized. And that can happen in lots of different ways. In fact, in some of the parishes, the larger suburban parishes, people say maybe we should hire somebody part-time to help us do this better. To build a greater sense of unity among Spanish-speaking and English-speaking people within the local church. So it's not 2 churches, it's 1 church. To increase collaboration among all entities in the local, national, and universal church. Collaboration is really a hallmark of this project, where people begin to say, how can we do it better together? Why do we have to duplicate efforts if we could do them in sharing? So collaboration is a pivotal point of the whole planning process. And lastly, to be an advocate for peace and justice in the church and in the world. In September, you're going to get binders that will have very good communication ideas of bulletin announcements that put these goals, not all 10 of them at once, maybe 2 of them a week, in parish bulletins, so people get the idea that this is not about closing parishes. It really is about building vibrant parish lives. And when people participate in that process, their faith is really energized.
I can almost guarantee that one of the questions you'll be asked many times is, why are we doing this? Why are we doing this project? Why can't we just keep doing what we've been doing? Well, in our understanding, these goals are the answer to that question. So it's about vibrant parish life. It's about strengthening the presence and the ministry of the church throughout the diocese and so on. So I would encourage you to reflect on these goals yourself, because if they just remain words on a page, they really aren't that helpful. But if they answer people's legitimate question, why are we doing it, it helps build a little confidence in the process. I want to take a next step before we get into all the how-tos and the mechanics of it, to talk with you about some of the assumptions. So it's on page 5 in your packet if you want to look there, or you can follow it on the screen for now and reflect or use the packet later. These assumptions matter because they kind of undergird what we're going to explain to you in terms of the specifics of how is this going to be done, when is it going to be done, what's your responsibility in doing this. So briefly, the first one, the Paschal Mystery is both central to our faith and to this planning process. Well, the process, as the bishop has already said, is not about closing churches. It's likely that some churches are going to close. It's likely there are going to be some experiences of death in this process, of somebody not being able to go to the regular pew at the regular time to worship, or having to see their community no longer gathering in the same place. What's critical about that is what's the attitude about that? And to be very, very honest with you, as I've reflected now for over 20 years on this process, I've seen some places where, not out of intent, but out of reality, winners and losers are created. And you can't afford, we can't afford as Catholics to have that. Let me just give you one example. There have been in other dioceses, let's say 4 parishes, who have talked with each other. And ultimately, there's a decision made about those 4 parishes becoming one. The question is, how do they become one? In some places in our country, they become one by saying there's a closing liturgy, let's say at parish A, B, and C. And parish D stays open. Parish D sees themselves as the winners, as one pastor we worked with elsewhere said. Parish A, B, and C, the losers. But then parish D says to the other folks, come and join us. Would you go if you felt like a loser? Many people around the country have answered that, no. I'm not going to go there and feel like a loser. This process says something very, very different. It says if parishes A, B, C, and D are going to join together, that there's a closing liturgy in all 4 parishes. Because all 4 parishes, as they have been, will be no more. And there is an opening liturgy of a new community with a new name and a new reality and a new opportunity for everybody from those 4 former communities to come together and to say we have the marvelous, unique, amazing opportunity of creating a new Christian community that never existed before. Now, I don't want to have any rose color, neither Maureen and I do in our glasses, but I'll just tell you again and again, that makes an enormous difference. And one more thing, one of the pastors who literally was going to be the pastor at one of those sites of 4 communities coming together, the new name of that community in the Diocese of Scranton is Divine Mercy. He said to me at one point, he was going to be the pastor of the new community. He said, John, I know the other 3 communities know something's changing, but I experience a smugness among some of our people. They do think they've won. I need to help them understand we're all changing. We're all going through something new. My folks are not going to be sitting in the same pews with the same people. We're not going to have the same Mass time. We're no longer the same parish. I need to help them come to grips with what's changing. He said to me just a couple weeks ago, we were back there for a meeting, my people are actually struggling in some ways from the former parish on the same site more than some of the others. So that dynamic of saying we together are working on this, we together are creating something new, is really important. So the Paschal Mystery calls us to say, how do we honor the life of each community in this diocese? How do we recognize the deaths or the changes that are taking place? And how do we work together to make this a gift of new life for the community? So the Paschal Mystery is, I know in each of your lives, really important, but I ask you to reflect on it in light of this project, so this project can be a gift. Parishes, another assumption exists for the mission of the church. How do we call every parish to look large at how they are proclaiming the gospel, build community, being of service, celebrating in word and worship? Underneath this process is an assumption about the commitment to Eucharist, prayer, and spirituality as being critical to parish life, and therefore to the thinking, the planning, the opportunities available in this project. The bishop's already talked about stewardship. This is a process where parishes are going to be asked to think about their human resources, their facility, and their financial resources as being essential for vital life. This process is also going to call people to look larger than themselves. There will be a self-assessment process for every parish in the diocese. We'll describe a little bit today about two ways of doing it, a longer form and a shorter form. Sometimes the smaller parishes like that shorter form. Sometimes parishes will use a lot of the shorter form but say, you know, we're really struggling in the area of evangelization or youth ministry or something, so we're going to use the longer, more detailed form in that area and then the shorter form in the rest. So we try to give you and the people you're going to be working with options as we go along. But that sense of people being helped and encouraged to think locally, regionally, and about the diocese, across the whole diocese. Archbishop Myers, your former bishop, we worked with him for 4 years in the Archdiocese of Newark. At a meeting similar to this one with the priests in 2004 in Newark, the Archbishop then there about 2 years said, I've only made one decision at this point in time about parishes and schools, and that is our present configuration is no longer sustainable. I don't know what it should look like, he said. Some of you may think I have a piece of paper in my drawer with the right configuration. I don't. But I know the way we are configured is not sustainable in the future. Let's think together, he said, about what is not only sustainable, but a way that we can thrive as a parish community. Number 6 is about you and about lots of others, that strong leadership makes a huge difference. I would guess if you're like other presbyters we've talked to, some of you are skeptical. Is this can really work? Can I really help this happen? Sometimes we've experienced priests almost sabotaging this to happen. But your leadership makes an enormous difference. The words you choose. This is just about closing parishes. This is about building more vital parishes, about strengthening the presence and the ministry of the church. We're going to be asking you to choose 4 people in each parish you're in to join you as part of a core team, pastor plus 4. I encourage you right now, as you begin to think about those 4 people who are going to spend a lot of time with you in this project in the next year, to choose people who are open to thinking about the whole diocese and what's in the best interest of your area and region. So you really discern and think together. So it's your leadership and their leadership, along with the leadership of the bishop and Monsignor Showalter and others. We believe in this process is built on the idea that all parishes will be more effective if they plan for the future, especially not under crisis, but as a regular, ongoing part of parish life. So we're helping to create the future with God's help, rather than be victims of the present or of certain circumstances. This is about also parishes being stronger when they work together. So we're going to be asking you to think about who should your conversation partners be. given wherever you are in the 4 regions of the diocese, who would be the 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 other parishes that you ought to talk with as part of this process to think about the future? If this is simply a top-down process and Bishop Jenkins just simply announces decisions, some of you probably wouldn't be too happy, and certainly lots of the folks in this diocese wouldn't be happy. So this is about a conversation of some top-down energy. What are the goals? What are the criteria? What are the assumptions? With lots of bottom-up or grassroots involvement and perspective. And we'll get very specific in that. But we know when there's more ownership, when people feel they have a voice in the process, when they can influence the direction of this, their energy in living out the decisions that ultimately are going to be made increases greatly. The last couple, if and when mergers are needed, they'll be less traumatic and seem to be more natural if people in parishes have already been in some relationship with one another. In the future, some mergers will be suggested by parish partners who come to believe that consolidation is the best way to go forward. Just one example, in the Diocese of Scranton, there's a town, there's 6 parishes. They're in about a 1.5 mile area. The bishop at the beginning of the project around a meeting like this said, you know, if we could ever get to 2 or 3 parishes in this small area with not a lot of Catholics, literally he said, I would feel like I had died and gone to heaven. The people in the process had a chance to study their Mass attendance records, their sacramental records, their financial data over time. They had a chance to look at the criteria that diocese chose to use for its evaluation of parishes. As they did that work together, they got to know each other, people from these 6 parishes. And the most amazing thing happened in that situation. Their suggestion about the future was not 3, not 2, but 1. What if we became one Catholic community in this town? What if we took all of our energies and put them together? What if our worship was everybody from all of this area? Now, I don't want to say that has been an easy process to live into, but I do guarantee if you went to Nanticoke, Pennsylvania and talked to the people there, they would say the new life they're experiencing, it surprises them. And I want to give great credit to the pastor at the site where that community went, who really had a vision of helping people continue to talk to each other and say what's best for this area, for the Catholic presence in this area. So there's not a plan to close parishes. There's not a plan to say X number of mergers is the right reality. But it is to say, let's honestly look at each parish in light of criteria and make the best decisions going forth. When parishes do merge, it's a challenging process. It's a whole canonical checklist that we prepare so that the canon law guidelines are honored. But there's also issues around buildings and what's the best use of facilities and so on. So that's a really important consideration. And finally, when needed, planning resources need to be available in the languages of the people. In Newark, we actually had all this information translated into Korean, into Portuguese, into Vietnamese and Spanish, as well as English. So we're not sure at this time what your best thinking will be, but that would be helpful to hear from you so that this really is accessible. So these assumptions, there's 12 in all, are ones that I encourage you to reflect on, because as we describe the specifics of the process in a couple of minutes, we're going to be drawing from these. So if you have a trouble with one of the assumptions, in a couple of minutes we're going to stop and just ask you to see if you have some questions. We welcome your thoughts, because we want to join you in this process. It's not about imposing to you. We've already gotten great feedback from the Presbyteral Council, from the vicars, from diocesan leaders, so we've changed some of the language and some of the criteria, because it only makes sense what's best for Peoria. So this is not a warmed over plan from someplace else. It's a plan that needs to live, and I would even say live comfortably among you. So let's just take 2 more steps. Maureen's going to talk about the 4 models of parish life as we move forward.
Thank you, John. You'll notice that these are on page 7 of your handout, if you want to take a look at it. And the first model is a merged or consolidated parish. The second is linked. The third is partnership, and the fourth is an insolidum team. And I'm not going to go through this in a lot of detail because you have the printed matter, plus you all know what this means. But the merged or consolidation is when 2 or 3 or 4, even 6 parishes come together and form one new parish. And John described that process where it really is all the parishes closing to form the new community. And even in Wisconsin, we had in the city of Fond du Lac, we had 6 parishes there, came together, formed a new parish called Holy Family, and they used many of the churches, but ultimately they built one new church. So this is, especially in small towns, this is happening a lot. And in rural areas, in my experience in Milwaukee, up in the area we call the Holy Land, somewhat to the east of Fond du Lac, 3 parishes, 3 small parishes came together and formed one new one. And a farmer donated the land, which was kind of almost right in the middle of all 3 of them, to really build a new church and a new parish center. So we have a lot of history of these things working out quite successfully, even though they're painful. And the painful part is also an example of the death resurrection mystery. In one parish in Scranton, I'm just going to give one example of this. Again, I think it was 3 or 4 parishes coming together, and the final liturgy in this one parish, which was going to be the parish where the site of the new parish, they took out a huge statue of Blessed Mother, and they took it out as part of the liturgy, and they took it out like pallbearers would take it out, just very solemnly took it out. And there wasn't a dry eye in the church. And then they brought in a new statue from one of the other churches so that the artifacts were reminders of how the 4 different communities came together for one. So again, there's just lots of ways to celebrate that death resurrection mystery, building upon the symbols and the treasures of our own communities and of our own heritage. Again, you can read more about that. The next one is linked parishes, and you have this already, where one pastor has 2 or 3, maybe even 4 parishes that he oversees. In this model too, we keep talking about collaboration. Can you have a common parish council, not finance councils, but parish councils? What can you begin to do together? We've had religious education programs merge, the beginning of youth ministry programs that neither one of the small parishes could have had on their own. So again, it's how to work collaboratively, even though they're 4 separate and distinct parishes. And again, there's more examples. The third model is the model of partnership. Now, many of your suburban parishes that are large are going to be looking to this model of partnership. Everybody's going to choose a model, okay? So nobody says, well, we're going to be a standalone, we're big enough, we have everything we need, we don't need anybody else. That's not acceptable. So even your large parishes most often choose the model of partnership. Partnership means sharing something significantly, collaborating in a significant way, not just a pancake breakfast, but combining programs, having staff development together, training lectors together, training catechists together, pulling together to do something brand new because in none of the parishes, nobody has anything for the grieving in a parish or separated divorce, or a good senior program for the senior citizens. So it's saying, what can we do better together? Okay? And this is a harder one because it's not as specific as the first 2. So we have like an extra page that gives examples of that. The last model is the insolidum team model, and that's the one that's allowed by canon law, where maybe, let's say you have 4 or 5 parishes that they're a distance apart, and it's hard for the people to move. But if you had a team of priests 2 or 3 priests working with other deacons and lay people to help serve the ministerial needs of those 5 parishes. So no one parish has a pastor. There's a moderator of that team, and all the sacramental needs and the spiritual needs are overseen by this group of priests called an insolidum team. So those are the 4 different models that every cluster will be asked to consider, and they will make a suggestion going back to the planning commission to say, we think because of this, this, and this, that we should be in partnership, or we think we should be in linkage, or we think we really, when we look at the whole criteria that you've given, all the criteria that you've given us, we think we should merge, or we think we should consolidate. So those are the models that people will choose from, and again, every cluster will choose a model. John, would you go through the timeline?
So I'm going to be on page 1 in your handout. We'll start there. So I want to pull a couple things together. We've said a little bit about the goals, about the assumptions. Maureen just spoke about the 4 models. I want to talk about how does this process move forward, because this is going to affect you, your time. We recognize and respect the fact that you have parishes that you're leading. You have a lot of work already on your plate. So we have tried and learned, frankly, from lots of other priests and communities about a process that we believe can work with your schedules, work with busy leaders in your communities. It's an 8-step process. Step 1 is already underway. It's called conversation. The conversation began at the diocesan level around first, well before we were here, is this something that's needed in the diocese? The bishop mentioned a couple of years ago thinking of an incremental approach before choosing this approach. So we did meet a couple of years ago with Monsignor Showalter, Father Tim, a bunch of others, Deacon Bob, several other people. So that conversation led to some goals and criteria that we'll share with you later. The conversation is now extending to you, to diocesan staff, to principals and DREs and the deacons in the coming months. And then in September, you're all going to be invited, actually required to come to a meeting either on September 13 or 14. There'll be 8 of them. They're outlined in your packet. We'll come to those details later. To begin the conversation level at a parish level. That's where you'll be coming, you who are pastors in the room, with 4 leaders that you've identified to be part of your core team, and there'll be a training session provided. Because there's 4 regions, there's actually going to be 4 of us on the consulting team. Joining Maureen and myself is a gentleman by the name of Lucian Roy, who worked for many years in the Archdiocese of Chicago and at Loyola University, and a woman by the name of Carol Gunther. The 4 of us also have been working in Scranton. 3 of us worked in Newark together, so on. So 1 of us will be working with each of the 4 regions. Those training sessions are intended to launch you in an 8 to 10 week process in step 2 of doing a self-evaluation of your parish. Step 2 then moves from a parish level between, let's say, mid-September and November into a cluster level conversation. So you'll all be asked to give input. Who's your first choice about cluster partners? If you're going to have 2, 3, 4 partners, people you think in your area you should be talking to. And we'll collect all that, and with Monsignor Showalter and staff's help, ultimately assign you to clusters as much as possible to your first choice. At the cluster level, think about this for a moment. Let's say there's 3 or 4 parishes in your cluster. When you gather at a cluster level, and that training will be in December, you'll then be in a conversation into January, February, into March about what are the strengths and challenges in each of the 3 or 4 parishes. You'll be asked to complete a cluster evaluation that says when we look at our parishes, these are the gifts, these are the strengths we see, these are the challenges. These are some things we think we could do better together. And then ultimately, you as a cluster core team will make your suggestion about one of those 4 models Maureen said. You'll suggest a merger or a linkage or a partnership or an insolvent team as your preferred future. And equally challenging, you'll be asked to say why. What's the rationale? What is it that you think makes that real? So those first 2 steps, conversation, suggestion, then lead to step 3. Monsignor Showalter right now is putting together a planning commission, a diocesan planning commission, 16 to 20 people, priests, deacons, religious, lay people, representing the 4 regions in the diocese. That planning commission, which will be working together for the next year in this process, will be asked to review each and every suggestion. They'll be asked then, after their study, to make a preliminary recommendation. The way I like to think of this is the cluster suggestion, step 2, is the best thinking of the people at the cluster level. When you at that cluster level with your lay leaders think about the future, those 4 models, this is our best thinking, and here's why. The Planning Commission then has the responsibility to do its best thinking in light of the goals of the project, and they offer a response, a preliminary recommendation, I should say, back to the clusters. The clusters then receive that recommendation, and they have a second chance to think about their future. Now, sometimes it might be easy, like in the case where those 6 parishes said, let's come together as one. The preliminary recommendation mirrored that. But let me give you a very different example. In the Archdiocese of Newark, well, lots of remarkable things happened in their process, but here's one. There was a cluster in that case of 2 parishes. They were really thinking about their future, preparing for a suggestion. They agreed on 3 things. They disagreed on 1. They agreed that neither of their parishes could make it into the future. They agreed that neither of their schools alone could make it into the future. They also agreed that they were the natural partners to merge. And they strongly disagreed on which site should be the site of the new parish. I see a lot of your heads going up and down. Okay. So I actually was facilitating one of their meetings where something amazing happened. 2 great pastors, really good men, good people, really wrestling with what to do. And in the midst of that wrestling, what's the suggestion we should make? Somebody in the group, it wasn't one of the priests, said, well, maybe we should just ask the diocese to make the decision for us about the site, because we're clearly at an impasse. One of the priests said, are you kidding? Are you really suggesting that we ask them to make a decision? And those people said, well, yeah, because we're just trying to do what's best for the church, and we're not sure. That went back to their planning commission. The planning commission really was amazed. I mean, it was surprising to them. And they ultimately, make a long story short, they went out, they visited both parishes, they visited both schools, they talked with lay leaders in both communities, and they wound up in that process agreeing with the suggestion that the merger should happen and all, and they wound up choosing a site, and then the pastor from the other site, they actually said, what if that pastor became the pastor of the new community? The reason they did it, this goes back to the goals, was the second goal, strengthening the presence and the ministry of the church. They determined if this particular parish was vacant, there'd be nothing in a 5-mile area in this part of the diocese. So those goals made a huge difference in that case. So sometimes what I'm saying to you is a suggestion leading to the recommendation is easy. Sometimes it's pretty challenging. Sometimes the suggestion might be partnership, and the planning commission, when they do their study and due diligence, says, you know, we think merger is appropriate. So whatever, step 3 is a preliminary recommendation. Step 4 then is a second chance for the clusters to talk. One of the gifts of this process is that it doesn't move so quickly that people can't still talk. So step 4, a conversation about that preliminary recommendation, moves to step 5. the clusters get a chance to make a second comment. This time it's a response. It's amazing reading the responses. Sometimes the responses are, thank you very much for agreeing with our suggestion and your preliminary recommendation. We're happy to go forward along the ways that we already suggested to you. Other times it's some variation of, you must have been crazy when you made your preliminary recommendation. It makes no sense to us. We believe this is the best response, and here's why. Please listen to us. So whatever the response of the Planning Commission is to study that, and then they make a final recommendation. It's a very serious step in this process. Planning Commission offers their best thinking then to the bishop. We're expecting that to happen by a year from now. By June 22nd is actually the way we're currently imagining it. We believe those final recommendations will be on the bishop's desk. And the bishop has asked for a couple of months to study those recommendations, to pray about them. He also, as you know, because of canon law, is required in the case of any consolidations to consult, and so that's an important part of the process. And that by the end of August next year, so roughly 14 months from now, he's prepared to announce his decisions. So that's step 7 in the process. Step 8 then moves into the hard work of implementation. And that doesn't mean things just happen right away. Like in Scranton, as one example, what they decided to do was to stagger their things. So they would say, for certain parishes, because of conditions on the ground, if there were consolidations no later than June or July 2009, others no later than July 2010, others no later than July 2011, and there are some still on the boards for no later than July 2012. There's 2 bits of wisdom in that. One is it's trying to say, what do people need to move through this change? And one thing they often need is time. But there's a second thing, and that is to give people some choice about when this is going to happen. So for example, one parish that I was working with in Scranton, or one cluster rather, their recommendation was a consolidation by July 2011. They decided more than a year ago, now that they knew their future, they didn't want to wait. So they decided, how about Advent 2010? So it meets the recommendation no later than, but it's a new church year, let's begin anew. Or another one did the same thing, they moved it up 5 months because it was the feast day of the new name for their parish. Let's begin our parish on our new parish's feast day. So there's hopefully flexibility in this process so that people don't feel like they're in straitjackets. They just have to react, but they can be creative in their own way. So these 8 steps, from conversation to suggestion, to preliminary recommendation, to conversation and response, to final recommendation, to decision, to implementation, is 2 slides on a PowerPoint. It's a lot of work. It's some real anger and sadness and loss on the part of some, and it's a marvelous opportunity for new life. But let's pause here before we go on to more of the details. I just ask you to turn to the folks at your table, maybe to 1 or 2 neighbors rather than the whole table, just as you hear these first 4 things about goals, assumptions, models, and the steps process. What's something that occurs to you?
I'd like to take some time for questions. Any questions or comments as you have now? Yes, Father.
One thing that you have 4 models of parishes, and one model that's not there is one parish with one pastor and an assistant. Will that just be completely, the traditional parish model will be completely gone? Is that right?
Well, what we're saying is one parish, one pastor with an assistant most likely would choose to be in partnership with another parish.
Sure, but is it possible?
Yes, but standalone parishes that aren't in any collaboration with anybody else, is
They'll
not
still
part of
exist.
it. It's
It's
not.
not a part.
Right, it is not a part, but a pastor, an associate in a parish needs to be probably in partnership, but that would be your choice.
Can you just repeat the question for the sake of the microphone?
Yes, the question was, the question was, are we saying that a pastor with an associate and it's a standalone parish is no longer a model? And the answer, yes, we are saying that, but it doesn't, that means that a pastor with an associate in a vibrant parish would probably choose to be in partnership with another parish so that you can do some things together that you can do better together, not just for doing them together, but some things that you could do better together. So it would be a partnership. Yes, Father.
Now, as you were describing the merged parish system, it would seem that the parish that was a result of that would be the standalone parish and not be in partnership with others.
Okay, the question is, as we were describing a merged parish situation, that parish, after it merged, would be a standalone parish. And in many situations, we're saying they might stay that way for a year to get accustomed, but then they probably would be in partnership with somebody else. Okay? Yes, Father?
In your comments here in the report, is a parish synonymous with a mission? So just logistically, do I need 4 people from the mission and 4 from the mother church or the parish church? Are you using in this project, is a parish also synonymous with a mission?
Okay. Monsignor, what are we saying about that?
You know, we've gone both ways.
Well,
What I mean, what I'm saying is, it kind of differs with certain missions. And not all missions have the status, of course, as we know, as parishes. As this question has come up, and we were talking a little bit about today, we haven't totally resolved that issue. But and it will be easier for me and with some of the other team, along with the Reed group, to just let me put down all of our missions. See, what are we talking about here? And I know Monsignor Mack brought this up, and Father Rashid?
To dovetail with that, what about those parishes that are suppressed canonically?
No, we haven't suppressed any parish. What we've done, we've just suspended liturgically. So those parishes, so we haven't closed any parishes. Now we're in process. Some of these are at different levels, Monsignor. But what we want to do is, in one way or form or shape or form, create a dialogue in that area to where even some of these issues that are have never been talked about, this will give us an opportunity to bring some of these to the fore. Some of them are going to be hurts, and we will, you know, we're not going to deny they're not there. We're going to admit they're there and talk about it. We've got, and I don't know, again, we're putting together some numbers, but we have parishes, some of you guys have had them, where the church has been run down technically and canonically. We have never closed them. As we are going through this process, we are going to deal with those. So at the end, we know which parishes are closed. Now, we're saying this is not about closing parish, and I said I can just see the headline at the end. Peoria Diocese closes 22 parishes. Well, 19 of them, you know, haven't been used for 20 years, but I don't know exactly those numbers. Father Sturdman here. Yeah. What's your?
Can I have a follow-up on that?
Yeah.
Given that the decision then of whether people from the mission will come to the regional meetings in September, the diocese will let us know that.
Yes.
Thank you.
We will.
I think this just needs more study, so we're consistent,
Yeah.
and we'll let you know.
Yeah.
With regard to the Insulatum team, a few years ago, back in the 70s, we had multiple pastors with co-pastors. I think it came out in Canada law that you have to have a canonical pastor.
Correct.
So what do you have on page
Correct.
3?
Moderator would be the canonical pastor.
So it's,
Yeah.
okay, and they'll sign the checks for and the contracts and everything else for all
Yes.
all the parishes.
Yeah.
Right.
We have certain areas right now that are operating that way.
And the question, I just want to repeat the question for the video. In an Insolidum team, who signs the checks? Basically, it's the moderator. Okay? Yes, Father?
When I go recruiting my parishioners for my core team, it doesn't look like there's a good job description on here of what they're going to do. And the first question I'm going to ask is what you want me to do.
Right, and we will send you a job description. We have a job description, and we'll send it to you. We'll send it to you email. Yes. But let me just say something about that. Basically, the core team with the pastor oversees the whole planning process at the parish level and then at the cluster level. They don't have to do all the work, but they're the overseer to make sure that everything happens. Sometimes they'll say, let's have a town hall meeting, let's do a survey about this, and we will give you materials on how to do a town hall meeting, how to do surveys, and all those kinds of things. You'll get that in September. Yes, Father?
What if you or John would comment on the situation of, if we begin this process this year, halfway through it, sometimes by necessity, retirements, death, etc., there's the necessity of changing pastors right in the middle of the process where he knows neither the people, the history, the politics. What you've observed about that?
Okay, let me just repeat the question. What happens if a priest gets changed or gets ill or dies in the middle of the process and a new person comes in and doesn't know anything about it? Our strong recommendation is that pastors don't get changed in the process. Now, if somebody obviously dies or is ill and can't do it, the next best thing is to get somebody who can work with the group and learn, and we would help them get to know the people and get them up to speed where that is. But we really recommend through this process that there not be pastoral changes, except in unusual circumstances.
But again, if 14 those of us who have parochial vicars, they're automatically going to be part of it, right? Besides the 4 lay people. So if that means 5 instead of 4. I guess what we'll say.
It's usually the pastor plus 4, and the parochial vicars are not automatically part of it. No.
Why not? Why not? Yeah.
Just, John?
If they are they want 4?
I'm not saying they can't be, but that's not been our experience.
I hear that it should be, and so that's your call. There's been pros and cons from other places, so you have to choose for here. The benefit of having them on certainly is to feel part of that important conversation group. The minus is that means one less position for lay ownership and lay investment in the process. So what you have to think about is 2 things, I think. Who are the 4 people that would join you if you're a pastor, who can have a broad enough parish vision to represent the views of many in the conversation? Here's the difficulty. Some pastors have wanted that and have wanted to have 5 or 6, or we've even had pastors who want to have 7 people on their core team, and that falls down, not at the parish level, but at the cluster level. Because then you have parish A that has the 5 people there, and your parish B, which has 7 or 8 people there. We've literally had to say to certain people, you can't all be there because it imbalances things. So I think a pastor, that's an important thing to think about. Is the parochial vicar, is it appropriate to have you and the parochial vicar and 2 others? Or you and 3 others, and you find other ways? Some pastors, for example, who have not had them on the core team, have asked them to do certain delegations. Would you lead our study of the faith formation area or the worship area in the parish? Would you facilitate, if they have the skills, a town hall meeting and those kinds of things? So it's not to say you're not involved in the process, but it is to say to you pastors, who are the 4 people that you want to suggest?
Aren't the parochial vicars priests the same as our priesthood? And aren't they going to be serving in this whatever we come up with longer? I know, hopefully they're item, you know, that they should have a little bit more say in it. That's where I'm looking at it.
You've heard our best thinking. If you want to have your parochial vicar on there, but you can only have 5 people coming yourselves. So, you know, we're not going to die on this, but you've heard the best thinking that we have. To get the parochial vicars involved, they can come to meetings. They could be head of the prayer and worship part, or the lifelong formation part, or some other. It's not to exclude them. It's just talking about the core team. Yes, Father?
When I was going to the seminary out in Boston, that's when they started their thing, and I was assigned to a parish over in South Boston, and that's what I was going to say, the parochial vicar, and they said you were going to come to these too. We went to the meetings, but it was the pastor who really was the one who was involved with the meeting, but the parochial vicar, and like I said, they said to me, since you're a seminarian and you're studying, you're going to come here, and so we would meet at the meetings.
Okay.
And then the parochial vicar, as you said, also led some other sub things for the pastor.
Good. Let me just repeat for the video. Father just talked about when he was a seminarian, he was allowed to come to meetings such as this, but the pastor made the decision. So again, we're not saying that people can't come, but you've heard our best thinking on this. Yes, Father?
Seems like the big hang-up is to do with the cluster and the amount of influence. We could take a page out of our ADA. You get 4 lay people, all the ordained in the parish, and then when it comes time to voting, everybody only gets 5 votes. But that way, the pastor or the deacon who is assigned to the parish are exercising the important role of service that they have there, and they're not like a second-class citizen. I don't see what the difficulty is. You just say 4 lay people and the ordained clergy that serve the parish.
Okay, we heard the suggestion, 4 lay people and the ordained clergy in the parish.
And you only get 5 votes.
Yeah, we try not to do votes. We try to do discernment. So anyway, I don't want to get stuck on this at this point. We can come back to it at the end of the meeting with other questions. Is there a question other than this one? Yes, Father.
As we go through the process, if there are in the clustered areas clashes with some of the decisions made in the Meitler report on schools, how will those be dealt with?
Okay, excellent question. If we're going through this cluster process and there's clashes with the Meitler report, how will this get resolved? I think we need to look at it situation by situation. Schools shouldn't be the determining factor. On the other hand, how can we blend what the Meitler recommendations are with the other recommendations? So we're aware of it. I don't know the specifics of the Meitler recommendation, but I think we need to look at that. But the schools shouldn't drive the clusters. They should be an important element to look at. Any other questions? Yes, Father.
You know, it's probably coming in the mail, but roughly how many meetings, or roughly how, I mean, like for a job description, how much time will this be required of the people and of us, roughly?
Okay, roughly between September and December, I would say you're going to have about a 10-week period to work. I would say it's not unusual for people to have meetings, not necessarily always the whole core committee, but every week, every other week anyway. So that would not be unusual to do that. When you get to the cluster, it might be it'll start out more often, and then once people get to know each other, they'll meet in small groups to do certain pieces of it. Yes, Father?
Another thing, Father Kipper brought up parish and missions. Other communities that have a significant number of people, I'm thinking of St. John's in Champaign, probably has about 12,000 members of the community, but it's not a parish. The Newman Centers are one. So, for example, St. Mark's and St. Joseph's, would that make a cluster, or does that not count as 2 groups? It's not 2 parishes working together, but it is 2 distinct groups of large bodies of parishes.
Yeah, well, I don't know how campus ministry fits in.
Well, it's not just campus ministry. A Newman Center is a particular kind of campus ministry.
We brought this thing up. Again, that's going to be
case by case.
Yeah.
Okay, good. And so where other Catholic communities are involved, that'll be looked at case by case, and the example was Champaign. Father, you had a question?
Actually, mine was the exact same thing he just.
Okay, good. Okay, let's just, yes, Father?
Will there be a diocesan timetable for rolling this out in the parish?
Yeah, and you're going to see it in about 2 minutes, okay?
Great question. Thank you for that segue. Very good.
Let me just do this quickly because you have this in your handouts. This is the key participants, and you will find that it starts on page 1. Well, you know what the bishop does. He has initiatives, he started this, and he makes the final decisions. You can spend more time looking at that. Monsignor Showalter is the project coordinator. Let me talk a little bit about the Diocesan Planning Commission. Some of you may be, or either have been or will be invited to be part of that. It's a group of 8 to 10 priests and 8 to 10 lay people, and the priest, deacons, lay people. I mean, it's that combination. Religious women also form this. They're appointed by the bishop, and they form this planning commission to, again, review the suggestions and make preliminary recommendations, and review the responses to make final recommendations. So that's what the planning commission does. You know about the priest council, diocesan staff. We met with them today. They play an important role because they can be supportive for you. Let's just say, gee, we really need to do something in collaborative religious education. And then, so you would ask the religious education office for some ideas, for some support. They may also work as facilitators. Here are the parish core teams. It's a mini job description. We'll send you one that's more in detail. Groups consisting of the pastor and 4 others who are responsible for overseeing the required work, including involving parishioners in the planning process, maintaining open and direct communications. You can read the rest of that for yourself. So they're part of that overseeing. Parish council and parish finance councils, while the core team are responsible for seeing that the required work is completed, it's vital for input to have input from the councils. Cluster core teams, the cluster core teams are made up of the individual parish core teams coming together. It's not a new set of people. Staff and parishioners, hopefully active participation in the planning process. We're going to send you even general intercessions for the liturgies, things to put in your bulletin. You'll have all that in September. We can send some of it even before September if that's helpful. Consultants, John and myself, and Lucian, Roy, and Carol. Now, this is a resource that you will find very helpful. Diocesan parish facilitators. These are experienced men and women we've already been talking to about having deacons, including as well as other people within the diocese who are trained and work to help in facilitating key meetings. We will do the training. Let's say you decide at the parish level, we should have a town hall meeting on Sunday afternoon when the Bears aren't playing, and come together and get the input from the parishioners. Okay, you might get a diocesan facilitator then to facilitate that for you. The diocese will provide that. They'll provide the training for the people who will facilitate. At the cluster level, sometimes things get pretty testy. It's really important to have an outside person come in and facilitate. We will help them with the agenda, with getting prayer services together. We will be consultants to them, but because we can't be here all the time, we can't do that. So these are key people that we really encourage you to use. And this is a great segue into the timeline.
I just have to say, as a lifelong Bear fan, that was not a slip of the tongue, Maureen. I think that was intentional. It's been hard to live with Maureen since the championship game of the NFC, but she is a Packer fan, so you'll get yours this year, Maureen. Okay, the question was asked about a timeline, and I think this is really important. And this timeline is intended to lift up one principle, which is that urgency in a process like this is helpful. If you say, we'll get at this sometime, or too much time, it creates too much uncertainty. So this is what's proposed. It really starts around now, the bishop meeting with you, diocesan leaders and others to become oriented to the process, to help people understand their roles in the process. We expect to meet with the Planning Commission soon as well. During July and August, summertime, we're going to finish preparing some information. The one important part of this, we'll have the manuals and all, is you'll be receiving, as part of this process in September, what are called diocesan or data verification forms. So the data will be 5-year records of financial histories and debts and where are you with parish assessments, sacramental records, mass attendance records, all put in one document, usually 2 pages. Your responsibility with the core teams will be to verify that data. If it's incorrect, if the diocese doesn't have all the most accurate information, then help make sure it's accurate. So that happens. But beginning in September, September 13 and 14 are those training sessions. They're 2.5 hours in length. There is a time for prayer. There is a giving to every single member of a core team planning guide. I like to say in that guide is everything you need to be successful in that process. And our role is not to make any decisions in this process, but it's to help you be successful as you move forward in the process. So in September, that launches, as Maureen said, about an 8 to 10 week experience. So between September and let's say late November, you complete the parish self-evaluation. It really isn't helpful if just the 5 of you do the work yourself. So that's why we'll give you lots of examples of ways others have involved parishes. Some do parish surveys on different issues. We have samples of those. We could send them to you. Some have town hall meetings. Some have focus groups. Some create task forces. We'll give you a number of ways you can get more people involved. Because frankly, the more people are involved, 2 good things happen. First, they get invested in the process, in thinking with you. Secondly, there'll be fewer people when the suggestions are made saying, I didn't even know this was going on, and creating some difficulty. In December then, after the parish self-evaluation phase is complete, it moves to the clusters. So on December 6 and 7, there'll be 8 training sessions, 2 in each of the regions. They're in your packet where they are to prepare the clusters for their work of cluster evaluation and cluster suggestions. We know Christmas shows up, so it's a little bit longer period until March. The cluster suggestions are due in the current plan by March 2nd. So that's by March 2nd is when each cluster says, this is our best thinking. One of these 4 models, here's why. Then by the end of March, those suggestions will be turned into preliminary recommendations with the hard work of the Planning Commission. Then those are given right back out to the parishes early April. By the middle of May, the conversation and response is taken. This usually does take less time because it's much more focused. You've already done the suggestions, now you've got the preliminary recommendations. You have to digest that, ask yourselves what are the implications of this. You give back then the response, and then in June, the Planning Commission makes its final recommendation. Literally a year from yesterday is the current plan. So within a year from right now, or 9 months from when the plan moves to the training phase in September, the recommendations around the bishop's desk. Bishop Jenke has asked for a couple months to be able to pray about, reflect on, talk to people, consult with those he must consult with in terms of canon law requirements, presbyteral council, consultors, and others. Those decisions right now plan to be announced by the end of August next year. What's important about this is about 14 months from right now, is that the diocese not be in a state of suspended animation. You all have lots of important work to do in your many different parishes, and then this is an additional responsibility. We hope it's not a burden. We know it is a challenge, but it really is an opportunity to give your best thinking to a major development in the diocese. By October then, the planning to implement the directives would begin. They're announced at the end of August. So it's not about just the decisions made change, people need to prepare for that change. And they need to be respected in that. So there's a training. The Planning Commission moves to becoming an implementation commission. Usually most members stay because they say our job's only half done. But people are free to leave. It's not a death sentence. It's not a forever. And then we begin to create, instead of parish court teams, cluster implementation teams. They come to their own training and they prepare for implementation, and the current thought is that beginning in January 2013 would be implementation. So about 18 months from now is the timeline. Let me just pause on that. The question started, what's the timeline? Questions you have about this or concerns it raises for you before we move on to the criteria? Yes.
I'm worried that I'm going to say something stupid or misrepresent this gift program, and so I'm really concerned that I make the proper announcements with the proper language, with the proper time, proper inserts, that we're all on the same page. Is there something like that you can start to give us right away?
Yes. The bishop wanted to wait till all of you were here today, but yes, we will give you talking points. There's an awareness, obviously, once this meeting in diocesan leaders, it's going to become public. So I think likely for the next issue of the diocesan paper, that'll be in there. But yes, we will give you talking points. There might well be a press conference, press release.
I'm talking about specific scripts, not just talking points that we have to put together, because I might screw it up.
Okay, well, our experience is that a script is not as useful, so you can tell us differently here. If you want a script, we can give you a script. Our experience is that the feedback that has come in is that when people read from a script, it seems canned. It doesn't flow from your way of communicating. It's somebody else's words that you're reading. So on the one hand, this material is the core material. But we're here to be of service to you. If you want talking points, some of you, and others of you want a script, we can do both.
We can do bulletin announcements.
Yeah, we'll do bulletin announcements if that helps you. We're already preparing those for the 18 months for beginning in September, but if you want them beforehand, we can do that as well.
For the different stages of this project, if you had bulletin inserts, things that we could read, that we could say, okay, this is exactly what I'm representing correctly from the diocese. I just want to do things correctly.
Great, thank you. So for the sake of the tape, I'm sorry I didn't repeat it. The question is, will you be provided with talking points, with scripts, with bulletin inserts? The answer is yes, you will, and we can do it sooner rather than later. And I want to just say one other thing. There are no silly questions. If you don't understand what your responsibility is, then you're not going to be able to carry it out that well. So please, we're happy to provide our phone numbers and email addresses. Anytime you have questions, we're happy to assist you with those. Pretty soon, we'll tell you which regions the four of us are working in. So you'll know there's just one person to call, because we want to keep Monsignor Showalter healthy and not answering everybody's calls. So we're happy to do what we can. There were a couple hands up, one here, one there. Okay, yes.
Is there a website or any web resources that you can use?
Great question. Is there a website or web resources?
Cheryl said she's putting some stuff on the website, probably.
Yeah, we would hope all of this is on the website, so that ultimately even the forms you need to fill out will be on the website, and you can download them right from there. Great question.
Who will determine which parishes form the clusters?
Yeah, that's a great question. As much as possible, you will, by giving us your first preference. We'll ask you first and second preference for cluster conversation partners. That doesn't mean that's what the suggestions will be, but when you look around, what would you say are the 3 or 4 or 5 parishes that ought to be talking together about the future of the church in your area, in your county, in your region? You'll provide those to us, and then working with Monsignor Showalter and his advisors, typically what's done is we send back a first draft that tries as much as possible to honor everybody's first choice, but sometimes, some people say, let's talk with these folks, and others say this. So we'll try to put the best first version, and you'll get a second chance to look at it. We want you to be at least comfortable with who you're talking with. It doesn't help if you're saying this doesn't make sense. So that's a great question, and we'll try to do that as soon as we can.
Especially because some of us are new pastors and we don't know all the parishes in the area.
Yeah, I think the question is for new pastors, you may not know the other parishes. I would say talk to your brother priest about that. Maybe talk to the former pastor in your area if that's possible. Just get the best thinking. And if you just offer that, I think our experience has been, there's been fear about that. It's really worked out well because we try to use the best judgment of everybody with their input. Thank you. There's a question over here? Yes.
After the implementation takes place, will there be any kind of a follow-up how to see how the whole program is working?
Excellent. The question is, after implementation begins to take place, will there be a follow-up? Most definitely. Now, we're just contracted with the planning right now, but let me just talk about other dioceses we've worked in. A mechanism is set up so once the planning is done, the bishop's directives are announced, the planning for implementation is has taken place, then people are, I'll just use Scranton as one example, but Newark uses the same time frame. By every April or May 15th, every cluster sends in an annual report. The first time, it's simply a report of what do we plan to do to implement the directives in the next year. So the first year, this is our game plan, this is our action plan for the next year. But the next year down the road, or Newark is now 4 years down the road and still doing that, the annual reports are an evaluation of what we did and then a planning for the next year. And just having been through Scranton's 50 clusters and those reports 2 weeks ago, it was really inspiring to hear the kind of new life that's being reported. In fact, one of their most senior pastors, maybe their most esteemed pastor, stood up at the end of their implementation commission meeting 2 weeks ago today, as a matter of fact, and he said, you know, 3 years ago I was skeptical about this process. I didn't believe that we could do together what this timeline essentially said. 3 years beyond that, I'm proud as can be of what's been accomplished with God's help. So yes, that accountability going forward is a very important part of this. We're just trying not to overwhelm you with too much information now, but that's an important element. Thank you for raising the question. Let's just do two maybe more things, Maureen, as we move toward ending. It's about 2:50. And so that's the timeline. Maureen's going to talk about the criteria. And what's important about this is you have a right to know, and so do the parishes, how are you going to be evaluated within this process. So that's what Maureen will talk about. Good.
This is criteria that's not totally finalized, but it's pretty close. It's been already vetted through the priest council. The bishop and Monsignor have looked at it, but it's still in, I'd say, near final draft form. So if you have other ideas or if something's missing, we'd be happy to know about it. Now, this is important because it's what every parish is going to use to evaluate itself. And then when it gets to a cluster level, the cluster is going to be using the same criteria to say, well, what can we do better together as a cluster or as a consolidated parish or as a linked parish. So it falls into four main categories: sacramental life, evangelization, catechetics and Catholic schools, stewardship and justice, and effective administration. And these are just samples. These are all there, so I'm not going to read them to you. But a parish would say, for instance, they're looking at their sacramental life. The Eucharist is the source and summit of life, of the life and mission of this parish. And if they use the long form, they'd say, well, we're average on that. I'm not sure how many of our parishioners would say that, but we're really average there. Or parishioners really are into this, and they're into the new missal. They may be very good. They might check off very good. Let's say our parish doesn't really think about the Eucharist that way at all. They would check off needs more action, needs improvement, okay? Or if they're a small rural parish and they don't want to go through it in that way, they would have what we call a short form that they could do it that way. But the criteria is the same. So For instance, number 3, parishioners are well trained for sacramental ministries. This is an area where you say, yeah, I guess ours are okay. They've been around for a while. We think they know what they're doing. And your cluster parish says, well, we got a really good way to train our Eucharistic ministers and our lectors, and maybe that's an area in partnership where you might start doing some things together. Same thing, music. This is evangelization catechesis in Catholic schools. The parish provides excellent lifelong catechetical formation, including but not limited to. In other words, it's a checklist to begin to look at how viable and how vital is your parish. You don't have to do these by yourself. The core committee shouldn't be doing it by itself. It should be asking parishioners how they feel about this. When I worked I just finished working in St. Petersburg, and they not only said how well do they think they're doing, they had another column, and it was how important is this to you? And where there was a gap, it's not happening very well, but it's very important. That's how they began to prioritize what they were going to do next. The whole area of stewardship, I know you're a stewardship diocese, so stewardship and justice might be one of your strengths as a diocese. But these are very specific things that your core committee and your parishioners would look at. Effective administration, this is a critical one. It talks again about stewardship in number 12. Number 13, are we financially viable? Do we owe the diocese? Are we paying our insurance? Are we keeping up with our bills? Or are we just using our reserves to survive? Are we taking into account the diminishing number of priests? The parish is taking into account geographic proximity and mass attendance. The parish has adequate and well-trained and compensated staff. Again, it's the administrative part to take a look at. So you can see what it does. It takes the major ministries of the church of word, worship, service, and administration, and gives you a chance to look at it. There's an ecclesiology underneath this that says this vibrant parishes really have vibrant sacramental lives, have stimulating lifelong faith formation, has an active service component, and has solid administration underneath it. So people will be learning more about the parish. Really, the whole process is one way to look at adult formation. One of the things I'd like to do now, it's not that. On your tables, you have a form. It's got some red at the top of it, and it's for the pastor, the core team, the pastor +4. And what we need, we don't need this before August 15th. And in the meantime, we will send you a one-pager that has a description of this, plus the description of the role of the secretary of the core team and the facilitator or chair of the core team. It's a one-pager, you will get it. What we need you to do is to fill this form out and get it back to Dr. McLean with the names of your core committee and phone numbers, email addresses are really important, because what we really would like to do is communicate very quickly to everybody with emails. And we usually do regular updates. Here's what's happening in the gift program. As we go through, we'll often do Q&As. And that's something else you can put in your bulletins, as bulletin inserts. The questions that keep coming up, we will send you those things, and it's just so much easier for Monsignor to be able to send those things out electronically. So that's why it's important to be sure that everything's legible, because once you get wrong emails, it's really hard to get that cleaned up. So
we got the answer to Father Kipper's question about missions.
yes, we will get that. We just have to consult with how the diocese wants to do that. We will get you that information as soon as possible. Okay, about missions. The question was, when will you get the information about missions? We'll do it as soon as possible. So that's kind of the only homework piece that you actually have. And we can also start sending you things for your bulletins. You might want to start you don't want to start too early because people are gone and they're going to miss things, but we'll do the best we can on that too. John's going to take us through the last part.
So just in terms of Monsignor Mack's comments, I have 4 things so far on my list. The mission issue, I think that's a fair issue. The issue of parochial vicars that came up question of Newman Center or those kinds of things, and the impact of the Meitler report. So those are some of the things that I'm learning, and we'll kind of work, and we'll get back to you on that. I want to kind of move toward a closing, larger piece away from the details. We've kind of put a lot out there for you. Partly our thought was you can take the packet home and digest it more. Maybe I should also give you a number to call, so I think I'll do that before I end. But I'd like to kind of take a step back from the details of this and say, what's this all really about? So I'm going to offer you, Maureen and I are going to offer you one picture and a couple thoughts on change, on resistance to change, and on new life. So first, in terms of change, we want to offer you a reflection you may have seen before if you've read any of Bill Bridges' work. We've drawn from some of his work. He's written books like Surviving Life's Transitions or Surviving Organizational Change. And he talks about the 3 stages in any change process. Within any change, there's always something that's ending. On the other side, there's a new beginning, hoped for anyway. And in the middle, there's what he calls the neutral zone, but what we call the wilderness zone. And I would say a process like this invites all of you to live more faithfully and deeply in the wilderness zone. We're not suggesting for 40 years like it took Moses on the way to the promised land, but the wilderness zone is a time of some uncertainty, some questions. Who are we? Where are we going? How are we going to get there? Our concern is that all of you thrive in the midst of change, not just survive. But that's not a guarantee. It takes all of us working together. So what we want to offer to continue this picture is 5 ovals, if you will, that we call the work of the wilderness zone, and is actually what is behind the whole process. So if you want to think about this process, not with the details, but in the big picture, this is the work, and we want to give credit the late Gordy Myers, former Jesuit priest, wonderful man, created something he called transformational planning that we have used for part of this reflection. The idea is, in order to move strongly into the future, the 5 areas of work have to do with the past, how to remember and celebrate the past. That example Maureen gave, we give you 100 of them, of as Paul bears processing out statuary and bringing in different statuary. Another church, they changed the altar because one of the other churches, people said, boy, if we would really feel at home here, the altar that we built, could we possibly move that in? How do we remember and celebrate the traditions, the rituals, the past? This transition is happening in this present moment, 2011. So every parish is going to be asked to root themselves in the present. In the present, what are our strengths? What are our struggles? We really try to use an appreciative approach, but also a very honest, transparent approach. So the parish self-evaluations, later the cluster ones, focus on some of the strengths and the struggles, root us in the present. In every community, in every diocese, in every organization, there are hurts. And there will be hurts in this process as well. So how to tend to those hurts, how to pay attention to the losses that people have, the scars from past experiences, how to help people let go of some of the baggage and move forward into the future. So some of the questions in the evaluations are, where are some of the hurts? And how can this be a time of healing, even as it's a time of change? So the past and the present, the hurts. The 4th one is really important, continuity. Not everything is changing. So I was saying to a parish recently going through some major change, God is still the source of your life. Jesus remains the one we follow. The Spirit continues to move among us. Lots of the people in communities are not. So what's deepening, growing, remaining? People need to know that, or they get more frightened. And the 5th area is about the future. What are the hopes and dreams? So versions of these issues are in the evaluations. And therefore people think about, what's our preferred future? What do we really dream for? If we could be the church we believe God is calling us to, what would that look like? So all 5 of these areas matter. But what also matters is what we said earlier, your leadership. And specifically you as priests, pastors, parochial vicars. Your leadership, your words. I appreciate you wanting to be careful with those words. But from your heart, trying to, as the bishop said, build up the body of Christ. In flesh, these goals matter. So we want to offer you 4 responsibilities or jobs as what we call change agent leaders in the space in the middle. And we think if we can all work together to help this happen, then this truly can be a gift. This growing in faith together, not just a program, but a true gift. The first is, can we all work together to lessen resistance to change? People are going to say, why are we doing this? I don't like this. I like the way it was. They have a right to those feelings. If we can listen to that resistance, not judge them as what's wrong with you, or maybe to your own resistance to this. Maybe you're struggling to say, why do we have to do this now in my priesthood? I have other priorities. So if we can listen to each other, and I'm going to talk to you just in a moment about 5 reasons why all of us resist change. And I'll just say up front, none of those are bad. So this is not about stamping out resistance, but can we lessen it so we can talk with each other, pray together, work together. A second area is providing effective leadership. So understanding your role, asking for help when you're not sure about what you're being asked to do. Invite those core teams into times of prayer as well as the work. Engage the parishioners in your parishes in prayer and reflection and contribution to this effort. Thirdly, to plan well. And someone says to fail to plan is to plan to fail. This is much too important to fail in, because it's about building the church in the Diocese of Peoria. So planning, we hope the tools we give you, we hope they're not, we don't want any jargon in them, we don't want any bureaucracy in it. We want it to be as practical and useful to you, and we're available at any time. I only give you, while I think of it, an 800 number. So if you have any questions out of today, we'll eventually give you all of our cell phones, but 1-800-916-3472. 1-800-916-3472. At any time you have questions, please use that number. We're there to help. And we'll get you to Maureen or to Carol, to Lucian, or to myself once you know who we're working with. So those first 3 matter, but I want to go to the 4th one in the end. We started talking about the first assumption about the Paschal Mystery. And I know that's important in your own lives, as men of prayer, in your own faith, in your own priesthood. It's critical in this process that we all believe in and act on our belief about the Paschal Mystery, that in life, death, and resurrection, that when the seed falls into the ground, new life emerges. This is hard work. It's work that will evoke tears in the part of some, perhaps even yourself. But if we can live the Paschal Mystery at its very deepest and best levels, the promise of new life is really there. And so that's why we wanted to speak to you directly, personally, honestly, answer questions we can, tell you the ones we don't have answers to, we'll get the answers to. But I want to end with a closing reflection on resistance and dealing with resistance. And sometimes I would joke by saying at the start, any of us who've never resisted change, please stand up. And I'll make sure I'm sitting down. So we've all resisted change sometime. I want to just offer you 5 reasons why folks resist change. This comes from the Alban Institute in Washington, D.C. If you're familiar with them, they're an ecumenical think tank. They study change, particularly in faith-based organizations. And this is what they say. All of us resist change whenever we desire not to lose something or someone of value. We have a personal investment in what is. That's not bad. People love their parishes, thank God. And some of those are changing. That's going to be hard. So we ought to expect some anger, some frustration, some tears, some questioning, harsh words. We'd like those harsh words to go away, but that's not a bad thing. So if we can listen to those concerns, we're going to lessen their resistance. A second reason is that people misunderstand the change and its implications. Why is the bishop doing this? There's no reason to do this. We need together to be prepared to talk about some of those goals. The bishop is caring about the present and future of the diocese. We're looking to make parish life ever more vital. We're wanting to strengthen the presence and the ministry of the church throughout the diocese. Whatever your responses matter, if you can help people understand the reasons why. Thirdly, if the change doesn't make sense for people, the why has not been answered sufficiently. One of the ways you can answer the why more sufficiently is to talk about the benefits that you see of some of the changes. You're going to be in very important conversations at a core team level. You're going to learn a lot more, I believe, about your own parishes. You're going to hear in cluster conversations about the possibilities of what can be done together that can't be done alone. If you can use that information to help people understand those benefits, they're going to feel like the why is being answered more effectively. The fourth one, different times, we all have a lower tolerance for change. I know when I'm tired, kind of at the end of a work time, maybe like some of you, I have a less tolerance for change. Personally, in my own life, I've lost 2 siblings in the last couple of years. I know I don't have as great a capacity for change as I did 3-4 years ago. We need to be sensitive to ourselves in that and to each other. Change is hard work. And the fifth one, if we have a limited trust in those leading the change. And this is really important, again, for you to help build trust in this process. Transparency is critical. If information is withheld, that diminishes trust in the process. If people say to you, I know Bishop Jenke has a list in his drawer, and why doesn't he just tell us it? You help the process by speaking back and saying you don't believe that. Or at least I'll say to me, I don't believe. We would resign this work right now if we believed that. If this was a sham, just to get to where the bishop has already figured it out. I don't believe that in talking with the bishop or in talking with Monsignor Showalter. I hope you don't. But if you allow those words to be out there, this is just about closing parishes, or words that talk about we're just going through the motions, that diminishes trust in this process. And this process requires some trust that those suggestions will be taken seriously, that the responses will be taken seriously. It doesn't guarantee all of them will be agreed to by the commission. We can't do that. But the guarantee is they will be studied, they will be prayed over, each and every one will be uniquely considered, and I can promise you that from other places. So with that, then we can go back to those responsibilities. We can work together to lessen resistance. We can work together to provide good leadership. We can work together to plan very, very well, and we can work together to make the Paschal Mystery even more a living reality in this local church. So thank you very much for listening to us today, for coming here, for saying yes to the work you already do as priests and leaders in our church here. I look forward to getting to know many of you better and to working with you. And please don't be bashful. That 800 number is there to be of help. So please use it when you need it. Let me turn this back to Monsignor. And thank you for being with us today. Monsignor.
At different times in this process, fear enters into my heart. one, if we do it, but the real fear is if we don't do it. And so, I trust Bishop Jenke. I love him deeply, and the thing is, we are doing this together. And we don't have all the answers, but working and sharing, we'll try to do it all for the betterment of the Church of Illinois. I want to thank Maureen Gallagher and John Reed for coming all the way out today. I know that John's going to be leaving to go up to catch the plane back, and Maureen's heading on to Milwaukee, but we'll be getting more input out. I met with Monsignor Beebe just briefly this morning, and already we've come up with a date where we're trying to go and get the deacons together. Dr. McLean is talking about getting religious educators of the diocese together to get to where we just kind of explain the process and what we're doing. And we want to do this in June, and so we can start getting you out some information to be ready to kind of go with this. We didn't want to do it right after Labor Day, so we put it back the week after Labor Day. And we'll begin working with training, we'll begin working with facilitators to help us all in this process. So we're going to be heading over to the cathedral for our Mass of celebration. And as we prepare to move, we just say, "Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen." God bless. See you in church.